Hi, this is Dr. Justina Agnieszka Chevalier. This is the video pertinent to civic education, and it's a comment on the current elections in the United States where I live. The new president, Joe Biden, is from a different party. As a person from a foreign country and also a person who studied extensively political science, especially in my youth, I would like to share our experiences in Poland and also in other countries as to what to expect and what to do to enable the change of party and the change of a person work to our benefit here in the United States. It is very common in all of our countries where parties and candidates are elected from two opposite fronts, so Democratic versus Republican, or left and right, and it's very common to do the exact opposite, meaning in an effort to present self as more competent, especially for example on local self-governmental level, to have persons all replaced by persons from different the opposite parts after the elections, and as if start over. That starting over causes the stabilization of the country and lack of continuity in placed into practice plans, and especially economic plans, political plans, and many other plans. And the importance of choosing a new president is to choose a person that in his or hers flexible judgment uses what it is that works to the country's benefit and was achieved by his opponent, and builds on it in, of course, lights and in changes of now expressed in being elected a philosophy, and that is how. Let's go a little bit into details. An example of doing pointless opposite, usually because of emotional church or derived from emotional church in aversion to one or the other side, pressures, is to eradicate things that do not matter and place in that money that could go somewhere else, and labor that could go somewhere else. And that is an example, of having an analogy of a removal of a chair. For example, here there's a chair. If that chair was placed by a person who has a belonging to a different party than mine, then I elected would as first remove that chair, even though, for instance, my guests sit on that chair, or that chair serves for the purposes of decoration and has no other than connotation of the prior party. And in worst case scenario is a removal of things that serve well. So, for instance, removal of chair that persons that visit the owner of the house sit having leg pains. That's an example. And the removal just because the prior party's candidate and president and office and establishment placed it. The example of building on the other hand, and introducing good changes is to investigate first what was placed in the light of philosophy of the prior party and was and is harmful to all, regardless of the party. So that is, let's see, influx of foreign goods and non-qualified seasonal workers was preventing and is preventing development of United States agriculture, liberal markets, as well as having own manufacturers be able to place right prices. However, influx of talented, qualified, and good workers was at the same time impacted, which resulted in many persons who performed important functions and were useful being not hired, not listened, or removed from private and public companies, and or attacked sometimes, and also nationalist trends and divorces that impacted friendships, relationships, and workplaces of the United States, and not only country but global economy. So as you can see, the first phenomenon is good because it opens up work market in the United States in inhibition of such influx of non-qualified workers who come because it is paid a bit better here, for instance, in comparison to whichever country of origins, perform work not caring for country. This is sometimes of importance, like fixing roads and things like that, and then leave while that work is poorly done or not done, and while persons from here, many persons, are lacking employment or proper workers' protection and salaries. The second one, on the other hand, is placing persons who lack, for example, exposure to foreign education in diverse cultures, placing persons who cannot gain such education being already here married and having children, cannot afford going abroad, and or persons who do not necessarily speak also foreign languages or know culture, placing such persons or removal of persons who perform such functions based on accents, countries of origins, nationality, as well as lacking protection to couples, American, foreign, or foreign couples, and lacking such protection also in labor place, which affected again workplace negatively as opposed to the first one, and created a lot of need for movements to oppose it. Nationalism, similar like racism, is a phenomenon like debris of the first one. First one is in intent to create independent, strong home economy, and independent, strong, based on personal knowledge being born here of all, especially pertinent to local infrastructure and own housings, labor force. And the second one, the debris, is based on a violation of, in fact, liberal pursuits of perfection in own countries, in giving persons who perform work well and persons who have genuine interest also in being in the United States, marrying in the United States, and having or having friends in the United States, so settle, and or who have special set of skills that being different than what is offered in the United States contributes to development in its novelty and its difference, to development of the country, which are specialized workers, well paid usually, and persons who are historically promoted in the United States. And so the first and the first one is a benefit of the prior administration. So it started work that the current party is expected to continue, meaning the current party wants for sure, because it affects persons regardless of political views and belongings, wants to have strong manufacturers and strong agriculture, local one, and not depend quite as much, having less, or having such impression that everything is brought from abroad on foreign countries. So you see, that is something that the current president Joe Biden and all those local self-governments and workers, and also that includes executive power, wants to continue. As to nationalism and racism, so lack of support to facilitate friendships that are based on personal affinities with foreigners, with persons of different race and nationalities, to support existing marriages of such nature, or facilitate and protect, when it is evolution, new marriages. That's the personal aspect of US citizens, or persons that have been here for generations, and persons that come from abroad, and also support non-deporting, non-divorcing, and obligations to marry, to settle down, and not forcing out of labor of persons of foreign origins, of persons with studies abroad, because that has huge contribution and value, is expensive, and contributes, especially in diverse areas, to deburden persons from here, and do what persons cannot obtain, or can obtain but in risking lives and great expenses and time waste. So bringing talented and keeping talented persons in private and public sector, and enabling all of us the use of local and state laws, including minority protection laws, including law offices in companies and outside, to be able to function well and on the same rights as persons who are citizens or permanent residents with countries who have signed agreements, such as United Kingdom, the United States, so often or Canada, or Saxonic countries. And so the Liberal Party, that has to change. Why? Because many of my friends and I, we have been removed based on false pretenses from work, offered work on unfair in comparison to US minorities that live here for generations, have been also mistreated in many ways in expectations of either divorces or limitation of any contact with US citizens, wanted often one, and because those persons, alike in Second World War, were targeted, we were unable to continue those friendships, of any color in fact, as well as we were limited, because of that change, in safety. So common were attacks on me and on my friends, also from Mexico, as well as from Africa and other places, and from China, and those would go unnoticed. Attacks on false pretenses at work, and attacks also on streets, and forcing out of documentation, forcing out of the country, that is typical of racism and nationalism. And yes, that has to change. And also in omission of us, as if we were here illegally, lacking to us a facilitation to have legal support, to legal representation, having uniformed access to police, DMV, and other things, as well as an obligation derived from distortion of conservative values to marry, to stay here, and limitation in salaries, or not pay or offer jobs pertinent to household, especially to females, and or well engage into sexual harassment, to not to pay us but seek personal by force as if prerequisite marriage to